What if a robot could give your doctor a helping hand? Or remind you when it's time to take your medicine? Hello, you're listening to Where What If Becomes What's Next from Carnegie Mellon University, where we're exploring what AI means to industries, government, society, and you. In a two-part episode, we're looking at how robots and artificial intelligence are transforming the way patients receive care, how doctors diagnose and treat diseases, and how the entire healthcare system functions. In part one, we'll take a big-picture look at these transformational technologies and meet a leader in the emerging field of softbotics. And we'll meet a co-founder of a fast-growing healthcare technology company and find out why their AI-powered technology is making life better for doctors and patients, one doctor-patient visit at a time. In part two, we'll do a deep dive on companion robots that are helping the elderly overcome their loneliness, treat illnesses, and improve their health and well-being.
Dr. Valentino to the OR, please. Dr. Valentino to the OR, please.
First, some examples of how AI and robots are playing an ever-increasing role in healthcare and the benefits they bring. AI algorithms are designing new drugs and vaccines by learning the structure of viruses and simulating how different drugs and people could interact with them. This reduces the time and cost of drug development and testing, which was instrumental in the rush to developing vaccines for COVID. Surgical robots are performing complex procedures alongside human surgeons with greater precision and speed, fewer complications, and less patient pain than ever before possible. AI-driven diagnostic tools are sorting through massive amounts of data from images, patient histories, and genetics to detect and predict disease that human eyes might miss. These same AI tools can also tailor a personalized healthcare plan that's ideally suited to each individual patient's lifestyle and medical history, and create better outcomes for patients. Wearable devices can monitor and detect potential health problems and alert both doctor and patient to prevent a crisis before it happens. And AI tools and robots are assisting in almost every aspect of healthcare administration, from resource management to patient scheduling to delivering medicines and food by robots to managing electronic health records. This increases efficiency and reduces costs while freeing up the caregiver's time to focus on patient care. We're speaking with Dr. Christopher Mueller, Director of the Statistical Department for the International Federation of Robotics, or IFR, a nonprofit association founded in 1987 whose 90 members represent more than 3,000 robotic organizations around the world. Dr. Mueller, according to IFR research, hundreds of thousands of robots are being installed around the world every year, and that number is growing. What other applications are you seeing in robotics and healthcare?
Other things are, for instance, robots that give you a gear ratio for very microsurgery operations. The surgeon makes a bigger movement on a joystick, and the robot only does like a tenth or even smaller proportion as an actual movement. And so instead of cutting 1, 2, 3, 4 millimeters, you have a decimal. Point something millimeters. And this is, of course, to the benefit of the patient. It works much better, it heals much better, much faster also. So recovery, all the processes are improved by using robots for specific kinds of surgery.
And you're seeing other new robot applications outside of the operating room.
We have intelligent wheelchairs using robotic technologies. There are products being developed, for instance, that identify stairs and then transform they have two sets of wheels. One is able to climb stairs. It's actually 3 small wheels being connected. And then you have the regular wheels, and the robot wheelchair understands how to use them, how to switch them.
Thanks, Chris. Now let's welcome Carmel Majidi, Professor of Mechanical Engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. Carmel, how are you seeing robotics used in healthcare?
Robotics are used in a wide variety of ways in healthcare. For the past few decades, we've seen robotics used in minimally invasive surgery. We're also seeing robotics used in rehabilitation and in things from motorized wheelchairs to devices that assist and enhance human mobility and also human independence. There's also a lot of emerging work in robot exosuits and exoskeletons that basically fall within the broader category of wearable robotics that are used in rehabilitation to some extent, but also represent one of the cutting edge fields where there's been a lot of great academic progress and research.
What are the benefits of using robots in healthcare?
One big factor with using robotics in healthcare is that it definitely does play a assistive role that limits and reduces human labor and the potential for human error and a lot of human-robot interaction.
Carmel has also been a leader in what is called soft robotics or softbotics, the development of soft, stretchable, and electronically smart materials to humanize the motion, look, and feel of robots and wearable applications, while providing greater dexterity and control.
Now, in terms of next generation applications of robotics, areas that I am a little bit more involved with, we're seeing robotics used in wearable applications. We're seeing it used for prosthetics, for example. And in these cases, we see that advantages of robotics compared to kind of more traditional, say, passive wearable systems is that they can broadly expand the range of functionalities that we can achieve with these assistive devices and technologies. So, for example, in the domain of prosthetic devices, incorporating kind of robotic architectures, in particular soft robotic systems, say into a prosthetic hand, can enable a wider range of dexterous manipulation capabilities. It can enable sensing and various types of sensing and actuation modalities that aren't possible with just kind of more traditional, say, claw-type prosthetic devices. And same goes with using robotics for rehabilitation and also for physical therapy. So, these are systems where, through motors, through sensors, through feedback control, we can achieve basically a broader range of capabilities in terms of the types of motions that a patient can experience and the type of training that they can receive. And typically, this is all going to still involve a physical therapist. So, rarely are these robotic systems fully autonomous.
Is that what is meant by a co-robot working alongside a human, in this case, a physical therapist?
Co-robotics represents a much broader category of how robotics are used across industry and healthcare and in all different domains of human life. Companion robots is one subcategory, I think, within that broader umbrella of co-robotics. And so co-robotics is really a much bigger vision of robots that cooperate either together, but usually with a human in the loop.
And that's where the new technology of soft robotics comes into play, right? Enabling robots to come into physical contact with humans in a kinder, gentler way.
The more we bring robotics into a domestic space or in a healthcare environment where it's interacting with a wide spectrum of people, the more expectations are going to be placed on these robots to be more anthropomorphic or act more like humans. That could involve putting skins on these robots that allow them to change their facial, features and show different types of facial expressions, for example, right? It might be robots that just feel more natural to the touch or are able to engage and make physical contact with a human in a way that feels lifelike and real.
Soft robotics has other benefits besides just feeling better, right?
When we think about these robotic systems engaging in physical contact with humans, whether we're talking companion robots, robots interacting kind of in a social sense, if they're assisting in human motor tasks, or even if we're talking about minimally invasive surgery, these are all scenarios where we have robotic systems in direct physical contact with soft human tissue. And in most of these cases, we have to be very mindful of the actual mechanics of that interaction between what's typically a hard and rigid robotic end effector or robot tool with our soft, squishy tissue, whether it's our skin, whether it's our internal organs. And so what we've learned as engineers in working within this space is that it really helps in terms of safety, in terms of reliability, in terms of comfort, when the mechanical properties of the materials that these robots are engineered with match or come as close as possible to mimicking the natural mechanical properties of soft biological tissue.
That must be quite a challenge to get a rigid robotic system to be as soft and squishy as human tissue.
There's a lot of inherent challenges with building a robot or machine using soft materials or building a robot that mimics the kind of the soft mechanics of the natural human body. A big source of that challenge is simply the fact that our existing motors and actuators are, for the most part, hard-cased components that are just intrinsically, rigid, right? It's very difficult to kind of reinvent or re-engineer a DC motor or a servo motor using completely soft materials. And so if we want to create an actuator or something muscle-like with soft materials, we really have to look at new physics and really redesign and completely rethink how we create these actuators. And so that remains a big grand challenge within the field of soft robotics. How do we replace the existing rigid servo motors, electric motors that are commonly so pervasive in robotics, and then find basically soft, squishy, kind of muscle-like counterparts to those?
Okay, and once you have those soft, squishy motors, you'll need equally flexible electronics to activate and control them, right? And so tell us about Thubber, a flexible rubber metal hybrid that can conduct heat and electricity.
Thubber is an example of a thermally conductive rubber that we developed in my group, where we took just a typical silicone rubber elastomer, and then to make it thermally conductive, we filled it with little microscale droplets of liquid metal, so metal that's liquid at room temperature. And so these little droplets, they enhance the conductivity of the material, but they don't, because they're liquid, they don't really introduce any kind of rigidity or stiffness. And we can do the same with introducing electrical conductivity in these rubbery materials. So these kind of two approaches, artificial muscles on one end, artificial skin, artificial nervous tissue, kind of soft, stretchy circuits and thermally conductive materials, that represents kind of another thrust within this field of soft robotics.
So what's next for Thubber and soft robotics? Could you create, for example, a soft-bodic beating heart?
In principle, there is potential of using fully synthetic soft robotic systems to replicate some organ functions and some of the kind of the natural capabilities of the human body. An alternative approach, which I find particularly exciting, where Carnegie Mellon is at the forefront, is to develop what are so-called biohybrid type material architectures. So not just relying on synthetic soft-bodic material systems alone, but actually blending them or merging them with natural biological tissue. We have quite a number of faculty here at Carnegie Mellon who are pioneers in developing these types of biohybrid type systems. A lot of this builds on decades of practices and advancements in tissue engineering, as well as 3D bioprinting. And so there's some, very nice examples of building, say, a biohybrid artificial heart that actually uses some cardiac tissue that's grown on a synthetically fabricated scaffold. These biohybrid systems really represent, in my mind, the forefront of where we can go with softbotics, and especially kind of when it comes to implants and regenerative medicine and tissue engineering.
Earlier you mentioned wearable devices. How are soft robotic principles being applied to wearables?
One of the categories within softbotics where there's been a lot of nice progress and advancement in healthcare has actually been in kind of sticker-like, or sometimes called epidermal electronics that have been used for wearable health monitoring. Think something like the form factor of a Band-Aid or a sticker, or even a temporary tattoo that adheres to the skin and is embedded with printed electronics and then also surface-mounted microelectronic components to be able to do a whole range of different bioelectronic sensing. And so we actually have a spin-off company from our lab. It was founded a few years back called Lifeware Labs that's actually commercializing some of these wearable electronics technologies. And so Lifeware has developed these sticker-like patches that can measure health vitals like cardiac activity, muscle activity, EEG. It can measure pulse oximetry. They've also made a lot of great progress in using these electronics to measure blood pressure. And so, as you imagine, a lot of different cases where there's going to be value in terms of continuously monitoring these health vitals for patients, whether they're healthy, whether they're working in very strenuous or dangerous environments. Maybe there is a patient who's just undergone a surgery or an operation, and you want to monitor their recovery and health post-operation. So there's all these kind of cases where it makes sense to have some type of wearable sticker-like device that you can just walk out the clinic or operating room, and just wear for long durations without having to be continuously monitored by healthcare professionals.
The more robots, wearables, and AI do, are they crossing any regulatory boundaries in the healthcare field?
A big challenge from the regulatory side with using robotics in this healthcare context is that once you actually have the robot perform treatments, or once you have the robot or wearable device start performing a diagnosis, then you are to some extent taking the human a little bit out of the loop. And then there is that kind of regulatory issue of, okay, well, how accurate, how precise, how reliable is that system in delivering that therapy or that treatment? And so you have to hold that robotic system to the same standards you would any kind of pharmaceutical drug. When it comes to diagnosis, for example, it's one thing if a robot is or a wearable device is collecting data on human vitals and then sharing that data with a medical professional, and then the medical professional is making some kind of actionable judgment or making some diagnosis. So that's fine. I mean, there's a whole regulatory process to approve sensors and devices that can provide medical professionals with that data. But now what happens if you take that professional out of the loop and now have the system itself now take that data and then itself make the diagnosis, right? And so, especially if that diagnosis, which most likely will involve some degree of AI, some degree of machine learning. So now there's some statistics involved, right? And there's likelihoods and probabilities, right, that are going to be tied to that diagnosis, based on the training and the development of those algorithms. That introduces an entirely new layer in terms of, what the regulatory demands are. And it's not even clear that the FDA and a lot of these agencies really have a complete understanding yet of how they're going to account for AI, machine learning, statistics in terms of their regulatory process for a lot of these devices.
Let's bring back Chris Mueller from the International Federation of Robotics. Chris, what's your worldview on healthcare robots and regulation?
We need regulation, definitely, but we need the right regulation. And we have to make sure that the things that we need to use are allowed, but that abuse or misuse of things is not allowed. And this is important in two ways. First of all, for all ourselves, we want to be sure that our data is treated carefully. If people are afraid that the data is used by the wrong people or for the wrong cause, then they will refuse to adopt the technology that actually could be beneficial if correctly used. The other thing is standards. Of course, if we have many countries or regions, economic regions in the world, and from the European perspective, we have a lot of countries in one huge region here, and it's important that we have common standards so that you don't really have to reinvent the wheel just because you want to sell your robot somewhere else now.
Thanks, Chris and Carmel. We'll take a brief break, and when we come back, we're going to learn about a startup company that is changing the healthcare industry with AI-powered technology, one doctor visit at a time.
This podcast is brought to you by Carnegie Mellon University. Located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, CMU is a private, international research university, consistently ranked among the top universities in the world. Its trailblazing research is focused on creating, defining, and accelerating the future of artificial intelligence. For more information, please visit ai.cmu.edu.
Welcome back. You're listening to Where What If Becomes What's Next from Carnegie Mellon University. Earlier, we talked about how robots, and especially soft robotics, are going to be transformative for healthcare. And now, let's talk about AI, and how one new AI-powered application in particular is changing the game for doctors and patients alike. We're speaking with Zach Lipton, the Raj Reddy Associate Professor of Machine Learning at Carnegie Mellon University. Welcome to the podcast, Zach. There's something you're working on that could be the next transformative AI application in healthcare. Tell us about it.
In addition to being a professor at Carnegie Mellon, I'm the Chief Technology Officer and Chief Scientist of Abridge.
Tell us more about Abridge, which has developed an AI-powered digital health record system.
Fundamental problem is doctors right now, we've created a system for a lot of good reasons. We want to have digital health records. We want patients to be able to access them. We want insurance companies to access them once you have them. There's all kinds of things that would be great to document if only you had time. So we want to document in perfect prose the history of present illness, the problem-based assessment and plan. We want to link all of our charting to the associated structured tags in the health record. We want to enter our billing workflows. We want to document informed consent when given. The only problem is we've piled on sort of documentation obligations. We've created a system where doctors are spending 2 hours in the health record doing clerical work for every 1 hour of direct patient care. So we've created a system where we're treating the computer more than we're treating the patient.
I know what you mean.
While the doctor has their own issues with the current state of medicine, that they're spending all his time on clerical work, the patient also isn't having a great experience these days because the patient has a distracted doctor who's staring at the computer and typing the whole time, often their back to them. And on top of that, there's just an information overload. The doctor's only got 15 minutes for them on a median visit and is dropping a ton of information. And the patient tends to forget about 80% of it the minute they walk out the door.
And so what can you do about that? Is this where AI comes in?
So there's this idea that we had, which is if only you were sitting inside the conversation and you had an intelligent system that could listen to the entire conversation and process it, you could actually go a long way towards both sort of mitigating this insane sort of clerical workload that doctors face, and at the same time providing value to patients to help them to understand what's going on in their visits and help them to remember their next steps. What we ultimately brought to market that has been so successful is a product that does just that. So the doctor comes into the visit, they have an app, they basically say, hi, this is my AI assistant. It helps me with my note-taking so I could be fully present with you. Are you okay if we record this visit? Starts the recording, conducts a normal visit. They focus on the patient instead of focusing on the computer. When the visit's over, they stop the recording, press a button to create a note. And essentially what goes on in the background is we've got the strongest medical speech recognition in the world, followed by a cascade of components that assemble all of these relevant pieces of documentation: the history of present illness, the problem-based assessment and plan, documentation of the physical exam, in addition to other things like medications, social history, past medical history, family medical history. And we get out is a complete set of documentation such that the doctor now, their job isn't to try to write all this stuff from memory and from scratch, but rather just to review the documentation that's already been drafted, that's gotten them maybe 90-95% of the way there, and confirm that everything is correct or make any modifications as they see fit. So we deployed this product. We were at our first pilot. I believe it was the first pilot for generative AI in the healthcare system in the United States in maybe April 2023 when we went live at University of Kansas. And ever since then, we've had this incredible tailwinds that it's scaled up from that to a product that is now a substantial fraction of doctors across the nation are using our system. And so our goal is not to take doctors out of the loop. Their judgment is still essential, but it's to put them in the position of their job is to verify and revise, not to start clean slate every time.
And for the patients, can they also access the doctor's notes and documentation via a bridge?
Yeah, so it's tricky. The difficult line to walk is you're limited in terms of the AI function, from an ethical standpoint, when we think about what can we directly show to the patient versus what can we directly show to the doctor or indirectly show to the patient via the doctor. As someone who in my academic research has focused a lot on the ethical, social, moral dimensions of machine learning and the responsible use of machine learning, a concern that we often have is when is it appropriate or safe to show AI-generated output directly to a patient? So if you have AI listens to a conversation, summarizes it, infers what are the next steps, should you just show it to the patient and say, these are the next steps that, as inferred by the AI system? Well, what if there are some mistakes? Is the patient in a position to catch those mistakes and correct them? Probably not in the same way that the doctor is. So, in the initial wave, we had a patient-facing app, but we were a bit conservative in what the app could do. The speech recognition was there. We were pulling out meaningful moments, like this is where you discussed your medications, this is where you discussed the treatment, but we were stopping short of showing AI-generated output in the sense of narrative content to the patient, because we want to be very careful that we don't cross an ethical line of like what happens when there are mistakes.
That caution makes sense. You don't want AI to mislead or scare a patient. What are you doing now for the patients?
One of the things that we're already doing is actually, in addition to drafting the kind of more provider workflow oriented after visit documentation, we also draft this after visit documentation. That's the patient facing after visit documentation, the patient facing instructions, which the doctor can then already push to the patient before they even leave the office. We were not comfortable at the time with the idea of pushing directly to patients who were recording via the patient app the AI generated after visit instructions, but by pushing them to the doctor and having the doctor review them and then have the ability to push it to the patient, we're actually able to be a little bit more ambitious in the value that we could deliver to the patient.
Are there any other ethical or privacy considerations?
From a standpoint of privacy, consent is paramount. So, our doctors, they consent patients when they begin recording and say something like, "Hi, this is my AI assistant. It helps me with my note taking, so I can be fully present. Would you mind if we record this visit?" I think when I first heard this idea, I had the same question, like, will patients consent, or at what rate will they consent? And, it's been remarkable to see that, like, the vast, vast majority of patients are happy. They're used to other doctors being present. In some ways, it's less invasive. These recordings are being listened to by a machine. They're also, I think, just so tired of having doctors sit there with their back to the patient that often, like, just the promise of getting more personal care, I think, is a big draw for patients.
What do doctors think about the app?
Well, we've gotten remarkable testimonials. I've heard a lot of doctors say that they were thinking of quitting the profession before, but they've changed their mind. We've had doctors tell us that the product saved their marriage. So it's pretty heavy stuff.
That's great. Nobody wants a doctor coming home and then working all night, right?
There's a phenomenon in healthcare where doctors, they call it pajama time. Doctors go home at the end of the day. They maybe have a quick bite with their family. And then immediately they log back into the electronic health record and start doing work again, often, after 7 p.m. And, it's important to us to show that we're net reducing the amount of pajama time. So, I think that the promise here is that with this technology, and it's just constantly improving, that we could be in a state where doctors are saving a couple hours a day. They're spending more time with patients. They're spending less total hours working. And in particular, that they're not working, out of their bed at night at 2 a.m. trying to catch up with yesterday's notes.
And what's next for Abridge, 5, 10 years out?
And we also see a huge potential to not just be a solution for note-taking, but to extend much deeper into the provider's workflow, because the conversation doesn't just contain the root information necessary to fill out the note, but often the information required to draft a referral letter, the billing workflow, and all these other pieces of work that also bog them down.
Thanks, Zach. Your AI-powered app will truly help make the patient-doctor experience a better one. Coming up in our next episode, we'll be doing a deep dive on companion robots, particularly those that are helping the elderly manage their loneliness or live a better life when suffering from dementia, Alzheimer's, or other chronic diseases. We'll let Ellie Q, one of the companion robots we'll be featuring, give us a preview of her life with Carol.
Ellie Q, let's do an activity together.
I thought you'd never ask. So, what are you in the mood for?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just kind of bored.
Well, let's spice things up. We could have some coffee in a cafe in Paris, or see an art exhibition. Or perhaps we could call one of the kids.
Oh, it'd be great to catch up with Alex today. Let's give him a call.
Okay, great.
Thanks to all my guests, and thanks to you for listening. Please check the show notes where you'll find links to additional resources for this episode. And to learn more or contact us with a story, idea, or comments, please visit ai.cmu.edu/podcast. If you are enjoying the show, please rate and review us on your favorite podcast site and share with friends. And be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. You've been listening to Where What If Becomes What's Next, from Carnegie Mellon University, where we are exploring what AI means to industries, government, society, and you. Stay tuned and stay curious.